Hey guys, how you doing today? This is David Lucas back here again. Welcome back to my channel. Now the time is finally here, ladies and gentlemen. We are finally here now at the finale of the Spider-Man series. Yes, guys, we are here. I am so excited. I'm so pumped to finally be sitting here giving a full spoiler now review. If you guys look behind my channel, I did do a little right out of the theater review right out there. If you guys go check out my channel. Now, here it is. Full-on spoilers, full-on review of my thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home. Yeah, guys, it's crazy to think that this at one time was just a thought in a head. This was just a little, like, okay, maybe who knows what will happen, you know, maybe Craven's gonna show up in this Spider-Man movie, you know, it just was the thought in the head after what happened at the end of Far From Home when Mysterio revealed the identity of Peter Parker. Ended up getting that little tease from Jamie Foxx on his Instagram that he tweeted out of him coming back as Electro. Then he had all those 3 Spider-Mans in there, then he deleted it. And then as things went on, more rumors started coming out, and then rumors started coming out that all the villains from the originals were coming in. Finally got the trailer, or like just a few months back, and now we are here. It has been out for the past couple days now. So, and pretty much if you looked at the box office records, pretty much everyone around the world, I think, has seen this movie already. So, enough talking. This is going to probably be a longer review, so let's get on, guys, to the spoiler review of Spider-Man No Way Home. If you have not seen the movie or you don't care to know the spoilers, turn away now and go check out my other video that I have on here, my out of theater thoughts. That's a non-spoiler review right on there. So go check that one out if you have not seen the movie. Right what I'm going to say is, if you guys don't know already, this is after seeing this 2 times. I've seen it 2 times in the theater now. And after seeing it 2 times in the theater, I think I can comfortably say, yes, this is my favorite live-action Spider-Man movie. Now, if you guys know my reviews, I usually start with the good and then go on to the bad. Now, like all movies, they do have a little bit of bad. No movies are perfect, but let's get on to the good, and let's just talk about this movie and talk about everything this movie gives us. Something that really caught my attention, like right when the movie was, as it was going, it's one of my first early thoughts of this movie, was that the pacing of this movie. The pacing was so perfect. I think this is like a 2.5-hour movie, but it really doesn't feel like that. Like, you just feel like you're just on a ride throughout this whole movie. It slows down just when it should slow down, and then it picks right up when it should pick up, and it just, they keep on going. Like, everything is going in this movie, and it's a constant roller coaster, and it works so well. And it makes everything flow and work so perfectly throughout this movie. This is honestly some of the best pacing movies that I've ever seen. This is even paced more better than what Endgame was, and that was a little bit of my problems with Endgame, that it did get a little bit paced a little bit. But this does it perfectly and paces it so well, and the 2.5 hours goes by so perfectly in this. And the overall toning of this movie, like the tone they have and the feeling they have, or the feeling of, especially in the first, with the desperate kind of feeling that Peter Parker's feeling of his identity be revealed and he's running away from everybody. And then you just feel kind of like the darkness. This is definitely the most darkest, but at the same time most heartfelt and most emotional type of Spider-Man movie, I think. And it hits all the notes that needs to be hit for a Spider-Man movie. All the tones, all the kind of themes that you want out of a Spider-Man movie, that you sit there and read a Spider-Man comic, that you read a Spider-Man story, you get all of those themes and all of those feelings that you have, and it is so perfectly, and my hat's off to John Watts for giving us that, because so far, you guys know my opinions on the Spider-Man movies. I did a whole review of all the ones. Is that I kind of feel like one thing that mostly every Spider-Man movie has been lacking is just that none of it does give off that true comic book Spider-Man feeling movie. Not really. The closest, in my opinion, that got into that was Homecoming. Was the closest to a Spider-Man type of feeling. Homecoming and Spider-Verse. Those were the 2 ones that I feel like that got the closest to that. But this is perfects it. This is it. This has every single beat that I want from a Spider-Man. Like, again, I keep on repeating myself, but I just am so happy that it actually happened, that it got every single emotional beat, every single comedy beat, every single story beat, all of that perfect Spider-Man tone throughout this entire movie. That was perfect to me. And the overall story, I think, throughout this entire movie is just perfect. I love that the story that they're giving us, the story of Spider-Man now figuring out his identity. The whole world figures out Peter Parker's identity, and then his friends. He has to deal with the fact of his friends having now, because they know him, they are, relayed to him, even though they didn't have anything directly to do with it. But now the government's on them. The FBI's on here. Damage Control is out looking for them. Jameson is all over the news, putting a whole bunch of propaganda, and putting out money out for Peter Parker and everything, because everyone knows his identity. And they can't even get into college now. Now the whole group can't even get into the college they want to go to. And there's this whole scene where I thought was done so perfectly, how they open up, their college things, and the college won't accept them because of Spider-Man and the controversy going on behind him. Peter Parker goes to Doctor Strange because he realizes that, okay, this is really the only person I could really go to right now to kind of help me out with this. So he goes to Doctor Strange, and I love that scene of how we get into Doctor Strange, and it was this big thing in the trailer of why it's all snowy in there, and I love how just the explanation towards that, it has nothing to do with the actual story or plot of the movie. It's just some side thing of them opening portals from like Antarctica or something like that. So that's why it's all snowy in there, and I just love how it's just it's a comic book. It's just a straight up comic book thing to have something going on that's separate from the whole story, but it's just happening, and I just love that. Get a little bit of Wong, that Wong now is the Sorcerer Supreme because Doctor Strange was gone for 5 years, which makes perfect sense. Then Peter explains to him, and I like how, because in the trailers, it made it seem weird why Doctor Strange, the way how he was acting in the trailer, I remember it was very weird and very odd, but now I think it was just the way how they edited it in the trailers was made it look like that, because now in the movie, we actually have like a full-on reasoning. We kind of understand why Doctor Strange would help him out with this. It's because Doctor Strange, he fought with him in Endgame. He fought with him in Infinity War. He kind of understands. He kind of feels sorry for Peter. He's kind of like, yeah, I get it. You did a lot of good things for us, and you kind of got, did bad head in the stick, like, right now, with everything being revealed, and you can't get into college. Like, I get it, kid. Like, alright, I'll help you. I'll throw you a bone. I'll help you out. And I like that. I think, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense for Doctor Strange, because it does show that he does have a heart to him. He does have a heart. He does care. He does kind of relate to Peter. He's like, yeah, we've been through all this stuff together, and you did save the world, so, I'll throw you a spell. I like that. That's when Peter starts messing up, because the spell, basically what it is to have everybody forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and then that's when Peter messes up on the whole spell, and then he starts asking, like, oh, no, wait, what about MJ? Oh, what about Ned? Oh, what about Aunt May? And he starts talking about all these people, and then at the final end, he's keep on screwing up, and Doctor Strange is telling him, like, stop talking, you're screwing up the spell, and at the very end, the key word that Peter says is, just have everybody knew who I was Spider-Man before still know who I was. And then when he did that, that's what messed everything up, and then made people, basically everybody who knew who Spider-Man was. Now, this is what they say in the movie, that everybody who knew who Spider-Man is in any universe just now got sucked into this universe now, because of anybody before who knew him stays knowing him, so that means everyone in another universe comes over that does know him. And then now we have that plot going on, and throughout all this, Peter's basically trying to fix his mistake. And once the villains come in, like Doc Ock and Electro and Norman Osborn and Sandman and all of them, him and Doctor Strange are trying to bring them back so they can bring them back and then throw him back, back in the other universes, because like Doctor Strange says, we're tampering with the multiverse here, with fabric and time. We need to put these people back where they came from. And then as they're doing that, Peter finds out that all these people die while they do, which some of them do. We see Doc Ock and Goblin, they definitely die. Peter wants to save them. He wants to save them. He's learning from Aunt May and stuff like that. He wants to be like, look, these guys maybe deserve a second chance. I don't want us to send them off to another universe so they can die. I want to give them a second chance to be good again so they can go back to their universes and be good people. And he has that big fight with Doctor Strange, and then I love how that's something with Doctor Strange too that they do really good in this movie that I really love. I love how Doctor Strange is in this movie for the perfect amount of time. He's in there just the perfect amount of time. He's in there just a little bit to make the plot get going, And then Peter throws him off into somewhere in the middle of the mountains and nowhere and ties him up for 12 hours is what he says. And then he's gone for most of the entire movie up until like the last couple minutes of the final act. And I thought, like, okay, that it worked perfectly. Like, the amount of times he put Doctor Strange in here fit perfectly to where Doctor Strange isn't that noticeable in the movie, and I think that worked perfectly for him. Throughout this movie, you have a story of, and it's especially up until the ending of it, up until the very ending of this movie, you have this story, this emotional story of Peter Parker, of Spider-Man, and to me, I am like seeing this story play out, and I'm like, this is a Spider-Man comic. This is a Spider-Man comic book made live action. It's not based off any comic book stories. It's not based off any particular story or anything like that. But it's a pure and out Spider-Man story. And that's what I love about this, is that it is a Spider-Man story through and through. And at the end of the day, it is still a good movie. It is still a good story. And that was one of my problems with Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, if you guys know, is that I thought it was a good movie. It was a really good put together movie, but it was a very bad Spider-Man movie. I really love too, like, Peter and MJ's relationship throughout this. Like, it is so strong. And yeah, it probably is coming out of the fact, again, like Andrew Garfield and Gwen Stacy, how they have their relationships. It probably, in real life, it's probably coming off same with Holland and Zendaya, their relationship in real life, but still, it just works so good. And I just love their relationship throughout. You really feel that they love each other. You really do that. And there's this one scene that I really liked that really stood out to me, was when they're in the kind of underground, and then she kind of like talks to him when Peter has his plan of saving all the villains and all that. He has that plan and stuff, but he doesn't really tell Ned or Zendaya it, or MJ it. And she kind of goes to him and she tells him, she's like, why wouldn't you tell us? Like, why don't you tell us about this? You should have came to us and, you know, informed us and asked our opinion on it. And he kind of was like, well, I just didn't want to endanger you anymore, you know, like, you know what I mean? He was like, I didn't want to endanger you guys anymore. And she's like, it's fine. Like, she looks at him and goes, it's fine, you're not in danger. I was like, I'm willing to come out here and help you. Like, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but she kind of says something along those lines. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, this is MJ. This is Mary Jane that I want. And something too that I like is how they put in her name, Michelle Jones Watson. They actually put in the Watson name, so she is the variant of Mary Jane. She is. Going back to what I was saying about that scene, I love how when she says that, like, Peter doesn't even need to say a line. He doesn't say a line or anything. He just kind of looks at her, and kind of smiles, like, does like a little smile, and he thinks like, this is why I love her. I love her. Like, this is why I want to be with her. And just that one little scene was so perfect to me. So I was like, yes, that is why this to me is the Mary Jane and Peter relationship that I wanted. Yes, she isn't exactly Mary Jane from the comic books, but the relationship and the feeling that I got from them in the comic books is so much, again, put together on here. And they're just everything, every scene they're in, when they're grabbing each other's face, when they're kissing, and even at the very end when she's about to lose her memory, and then she tells him, she says that, like, don't, like, just come back to me, like, don't say you love me yet, tell me when you come see me and say you love me back. And it's just something like, those scenes are so perfect to me, and I just love their scenes together. Now, Tom Holland in this movie, holy crap, he is a fantastic actor. And he completely just nails the role of Spider-Man and Peter Parker. What else can I say? You guys know my feelings on Tom Holland. He is my Spider-Man. He is my favorite Spider-Man. He is my comic book accurate favorite Peter Parker and Spider-Man put together. It is Tom Holland. He is so good in the role. And even in this, he does it so better. And you feel it out throughout this movie, how he's growing. He's coming out of that Iron Man Jr. type of thing. Throughout this whole movie, he's becoming more and more of Spider-Man, of the Spider-Man we know. And then once we get to the final act of this movie, he's Spider-Man. The lessons he learns, the stuff he goes through, the lessons that he learns, what he learns of how much wrong he was in the beginning of in Homecoming and Civil War and Infinity War and Endgame and all those movies we see. He learns all of that, and we see him now becoming more and more of Spider-Man. And there was this one scene that I loved him in, which I was like, this nailed it in a coffin for me. It was when everybody, when the big scene happens, when spoiler alert, when Aunt May dies, and I'm gonna go talk about that when Aunt May dies, and then Jameson's on the news talking about it all and everything. We have that scene of him in the snow, and he's not saying any words. It's in the dark. He's in the snow, and there's the big, screen of Jameson on there, and it's just Spider-Man sitting there with his face, and just the face that Tom Holland is making in that scene. It's like you don't even need to say a word. You already know that this dude is gone through shit. That this dude is at his lowest of the lowest. And that is Spider-Man. Let's talk about the villains a little bit in here. The villains, I loved it. I loved how they were able, because you guys know one of the big issues for Spider-Man 3 is that, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 3 at least, is that there was, villains were too stuffed. And I said in my review that the problem wasn't that there was too much villains. The problem was with the writing and the story and the way how they decided to put all those villains in there. That was the problem with it. This, again, just like at Homecoming, when I said in Homecoming, I like how they put a little bit extra villains in there. They were a little bit lower tier villains, but they put them in there, and I liked how they did that. This, they do it again, but this time they put bigger villains in there, but make them all fit, and make them all cohesive, and all just feel right. Like, none of them feels like they overshadow them. None of them feels like they have lesser screen time. None of them feels like they have lesser anything. They all get as much breathing area that they need, as much time that they need, and as much kind of a story to themselves that they needed. And it all worked and all flowed so perfectly throughout this, and I loved it. Now, the two villains that stood out for me definitely was, of course, Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin and Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. Those two were great. Now, let me start off Alfred Molina first, because I need to get down into Green Goblin. Alfred Molina, he was great. He was literally Doc Ock. You go to Spider-Man 2, because he was one of the things that I loved about Spider-Man 2. You go think of a Spider-Man 2, and it literally just, whoop, the same guy, the same dude, the same everything, and at the same time, they even gave him more depth to him. They gave him more of a character throughout it all. I like how they kept it that he was still, a good guy at heart, because that was the thing about Doc Ock that really attracted everyone to him, was that he was a good guy at the end of the day. He wasn't a bad dude. He was a good guy that was being corrupted by the chips that malfunction in his head. Peter goes in here and then ends up fixing it, and I like it. I just love his introduction, how he's messing with Spider-Man, taking him out, and he's used to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, but he's not used to this Spider-Man that has all this tech and all this extra gadget that's been through more things than what Tobey Maguire's been through in a way. And I just love that. I love how we have those interactions with the nanotech, how Peter can control the nanotech in his arms and all that stuff, which goes back to Spider-Man 2, how Doc Ock did have nanotech. The nanotech was part of those kind of arms in a way, so it kind of all connects, and I love that. We get him actually becoming a good guy because he fixes the chips, and of course, he was a good guy at first, so now he would be a good guy trying to help Peter Parker in here, and I love that. I loved how he was a good guy after this all said and done. He did help Peter, and he did end up being a good guy because that's what he was in the Spider-Man 2. Now, Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn / the Green Goblin. Okay, so my overall opinion on him back in 2001 was that I love Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn. I love him as Green Goblin. I love what they did with him. My biggest issue was the overall costume. I did not like the costume. I felt like the mask took away from Willem Dafoe being the Goblin and being scary and being frightening and being the way how I know the Goblin to be. One thing that I've always said through years now, just take off that mask, let Willem Dafoe do his faces, let him do his voices, and just take off that mask, and boom, right there, we have the perfect Green Goblin. And damn it, they did it. They did it. They did exactly what I said to do. I don't know if they were listening to me on this channel or bugged my house or what, but they did exactly what I've always imagined for the perfect Green Goblin. Now, I don't even want to see a Goblin or a Norman Osborn appear in the MCU, in which we did get a little reference that they don't exist. He doesn't exist right now. There is no business. There is no Norman Osborn. We get a little bit of that reference. He just did so perfectly. The scene when he comes back and then he has that kind of like in Spider-Man 1, how he kind of goes back and forth with the mask and him, that split personality, and then he breaks the mask, and then we're like, okay, he breaks the mask, and we hear that little laugh at the end, and at first you think like, all right, he's gonna try to pretend to be, Norman, like how he did at the ending of Spider-Man 1 with Peter. He's trying to pretend to be Norman, but really he's the Goblin. As the movie goes on, he is nice, he's with Aunt May. I love that scene of him stealing the donuts and stuff, and I'll look at it, it's just a little funny scene. The Foe's performance is just so good, how he's playing that Norman Osborn, that cowardly, hey Peter, something of a scientist myself. But he's playing that Norman Osborn. As the movie's going on, he's having that relationship with Peter, and he's smiling at them. They are connecting on technology and being geniuses together, and they're kind of having that Norman Osborn and Peter relationship that we've seen in Spider-Man 1 and seen in the comic books. You see, Doc Ock becoming good again, and you see him just like, okay, maybe he is good now. Maybe he is good this time around. But then the flip happens, and I love how they reveal it. I love how they reveal it with the Spidey sense, and I love how they do the Spidey sense in there. They do the Spidey sense perfect in this. They do it perfectly in this movie. And they do and how he's having that sense, and he's looking all around the house, and he's having that sense, and he thinks May, and he has that sense that May's in trouble, and he tells May to run, and then he has that sense where he goes and spits his web at Norman. And he knows it's Norman. That's when the Goblin comes out. And oh my god, when he is the Goblin with the mask off, and Willem Dafoe's is doing his faces and drooling, and he's doing that voice, and just the brutality behind Willem Dafoe's Goblin. He said he did all the stunts too. It's just the punches and the body slams and throwing Peter around. And then when Peter's on him and is punching him, like you can tell Peter's giving him his all, punch him in his head. And Goblin is just sitting there smiling and laughing like the freaking Joker. And it's like, oh my god, this is Goblin. This is the Goblin that's, yes, this is Goblin. It is so good. I love how they brought back the strength of Goblin, because he had a lot of strength in this. Remember, he beat the shit out of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man at the final act. And again, they brought that back in here where, Tom Holland, he beat the shit out of Tom Holland's Spider-Man in here. Let's get to the big emotional part of this movie. With Aunt May, and then you have him, what he does with him, and then he has Peter on the ground, and he looks at Peter, and he goes, I noticed your only weakness in life, because he knows Tobey, he knows the Spider-Man that lost Uncle Ben, he knows a Spider-Man that is fully broken down. He knows that Spider-Man. He's too naive still. Tom Holland is too naive. He's still a kid trying to think all the better in the world because of what Aunt May teaches him throughout Spider-Man Civil War, all the stuff Far From Home, of what she's been teaching him and kind of guiding him through. So he goes, and what does he do? He kills Aunt May. And then before Aunt May dies, before we even know she's about to die, I love it. And something that I love, something that they do so perfectly in here that, again, makes this the best Spider-Man movie, in my opinion, is that what they do is, what she says the great responsibility line, because it comes. The great responsibility line does come in the MCU in this. And she says, remember, Peter. She's like, no. Because Peter's blaming her. She's like, I should have done this, I shouldn't have done this, blah, blah, blah. He's blaming stuff. She goes, no. With great power must also become great responsibility. That is the line from the comic books that Stan Lee wrote. That is word for word what Stan Lee wrote from the comic books. And when she said that, all the chills in my body went up, and then my hair started. I was like, oh my god. And then the death scene comes, and then Tom Holland's performance in this, in that death scene, when he say, May, wake up, May, wake up, he's crying, and then we are crying, we are feeling emotional, because unlike the other movies when Uncle Ben died, we only knew Uncle Ben for like 20 minutes, a half an hour in those movies. This, we've known Aunt May through Civil War, through Homecoming, through Far From Home, through up until now, to No Way Home, we've had this Aunt May in our lives. We gotten to love Marissa Tomei as Aunt May. Yes, she isn't the comic book accurate Aunt May, but we got to just love her as a person in these movies, as a guidance towards Peter. And now we realize she was going to be the Uncle Ben. And after all this, all that complaining of, oh, this Spider-Man doesn't have Uncle Ben, that he's different than all that, no. Uncle Ben has been right in front of our faces the whole time. They took a more slower, more approach to it to where we would feel that impact more. Because back when Uncle Ben died in Amazing Spider-Man and in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man's, we felt that emotion. We felt, like, oh God, Uncle Ben died. But this, we felt an emotion because we were actually attached to this character for a few movies now. That's when it realized in my head that this is an origin story. All the Spider-Man movies up until Civil War, through Homecoming, through Infinity War, to Endgame, to Far From Home, all of that has been the origin story for this Spider-Man. All the stuff that I constantly tell people that he is building. That's why I loved Homecoming so much, because I knew that this is what they were building to. I knew that they were building him to become the Spider-Man that we knew, and I seen those seeds planted, and I'm so happy. I am so happy that I was right on that, and that it all paid off. And that's something that you realize through Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, who is supposed to be the villain that destroyed Peter the most in the comic books, is now the person who did destroy Peter the most in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Of course, in different ways, but the feeling and the tone and the overall after effects of it is still the same. And that is why this Green Goblin, this interpretation of Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, is probably not just the best version of the Green Goblin, not just maybe the best Spider-Man villain of live action, but probably one of the best Marvel villains ever in live action, because he literally gave the origin story to our hero without us even knowing it. Okay, now I am 30 minutes into this review, and then I have still not even talked about the big surprises of this movie. And that is why, again, why this movie is so good, and why this, to me, as a movie and as a Spider-Man movie, is the best one yet. We have them back! We have Tobey and Andrew back as Spider-Mans. They come back, and the way they bring them back, let me get onto this, is so perfect. The way they bring them back is so perfect. It fits the narrative. It fits the story. It all works within the story. It isn't just some cameo. It isn't just some like, all right, guys, we need to put them in here for the big woo effect. No, it is in here for an actual story point, for the actual story. And at the same time, when them being in there, it is not I just talked 30 minutes about this whole movie without even talking about them yet coming in. And without them in, this movie works. And they're just the cherry on top. And the way how they bring them in is perfection. The man at the right moment, I feel like, and they cut them in for a perfect amount of time. They were in there longer than what I expected. I was just expecting them to be in there for like 10 minutes to show up at the very end battle scene, and help. But no, they were in there halfway through the movie and helped Peter Parker. Loved how they were the ones that got Peter out of his shell, out of his depression, out of his anger and guilt of losing May, because they went through it too. Andrew went through it with Gwen. Tobey went through it with his Uncle Ben. They both went through hardships. They both went to moments where they went dark. And that's something that I really like too, when we were introduced to them all and everything like that. And God, I love Andrew. Let me just say, what they do with Andrew in here just makes me love him even more in this role. Like, I love Andrew Garfield. Like, I want a Spider-Man 3 with Andrew Garfield. I'm for it. I want a Spider-Man 3 with Andrew Garfield. And this is why. When Andrew is explaining to Tom Holland's Peter what happened after he lost Gwen, because Gwen was his entry. He mentioned Gwen was my MJ. And he mentioned after he lost her, he stopped rolling his punches. He went dark. He became rageful. That means this Spider-Man, his Spider-Man after Spider-Man 2, became dark. Andrew became dark. He became mean. He probably became a menace, a villain. He went bad. And that is so interesting and fascinating to me. And it makes me think, like, I want to see where you're at. I want to see what you went through. And on top of all that, the interactions between all the Spider-Man. I mean, yeah, we do have that pointing meme going in there too, which was great. But just the interactions between them. When we see all the Peters kind of, you know, being all geeks together, being nerds together, learning. I love how they're doing science together. And then we have that kind of interaction with Toby and Andrew, how Toby kind of explains this, like, yeah, you know, I mean, MJ, like my version MJ, we've had ups and downs, but we managed to make it work. And then Andrew's Peter Parker's like, yeah, I haven't found any love. I haven't settled down. And I love how Toby's kind of look was like, dude, if it can happen for me, it will happen for you. Just don't worry, you're gonna find someone. Throughout this movie, like, Toby is the older mentor, kind of hyping them up, kind of putting them back up, especially for Andrew too. And I love that. I love the love they give to Andrew in here. Peter 3. I just love too how they have the little conversations. It's the conversations they're having with each other and how they're talking about the villains they face together. And Andrew's kind of like, and Toby's kind of like, yeah, I fought like a black gooing alien. And then Tom's like, yeah, I fought a purple alien in space. And then Toby looks at Tom and it's like, wait, I'm trying to get over that you fought an alien in space. And then Andrew goes, you know, I'm just trying to get over the fact that you guys thought aliens had, I am so lame. The only thing I fought was a Russian mobster in a rhino costume. Toby, and he's like, hey, you're amazing, man. You're amazing. Tell me you're amazing. Say it. I want to hear you're amazing. It was so great. So great. I loved it. It was so good. Love, too, how in the middle of the fight, like, you know, because none of these Peters, well, the two Peters, Andrew and Toby's, they don't know how to fight with other people. They don't know how to, you know, be in teams together. And that is the one thing that this Spider-Man has against all those other Peters, is that this Spider-Man knows how to combat with other people, knows how to be partners with other people. And I love how he mentioned as lines like, hey guys, I was with the Avengers, man. I know what to do. I know what the Avengers. They're like, you're with the Avengers? Yeah. Who are the Avengers? And then Andrew goes, is it like a band? It's like, no, the Avengers like a band. And then Toby's like, how is this helping? I know I'm going on and on, but it's just there. Seeing them together was so perfectly, and the writing in this was just so perfect with them being together, and it felt so good, and it felt just so perfect to me. It was so good. And just everything about that final act was just perfection. That final act is probably some of the best final act scenes, I think, to any comic book movie. It was done so well, and you're smiling ear from ear, and the action was done good. And then when you get down to when you have Tom Holland's Spider-Man fighting Green Goblin, and just that fight right is so brutal. You feel the anger, you feel that rage coming out of Tom when he goes and punches him down. He breaks through the ceiling. The whole crowd in my theater both times were like, whoa, because you felt that punch. And then he's just beating the Goblin down and down, and he's about to do the killing blow. And then guess who it is? It is Toby. And that is something that I love about this, is that those two Spider-Mans, Toby's and Andrew both, and I'll get on to Andrew, but Toby's Spider-Man had his redemption and got to save Norman this time. He got he stopped him. He grabbed the thing and stopped Tom from killing Goblin, which what Toby did in the past movie. And then you have that scene in the trailer that everyone's seen of Zendaya falling, and you know, mirroring that same scene. And of course, who is the one that saves MJ? It is Andrew. Andrew saves MJ. And then you have that scene of he's crying as he saves him. He's holding. I'm almost want to cry thinking of this. Like, he's crying and he's smiling. He's crying, and she looks and he goes, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And then she looks at him and goes, "Are you okay?" Because she knows what he went through, and he's just crying because he knows it's like, I did it. Like, I want to cry right now thinking of it because he's like, I did it. Like, I it's like, damn it, I love Andrew. I love Andrew in this role. I just love him as Spider-Man. Andrew is a fantastic Spider-Man. I love him. And then when all things are said and done, when you have that big character arc moment of Tom Holland, that big character arc when Tom Holland, he realizes, like, you know what? Look what hell's caused because of my selfish decisions. It is time to be Spider-Man. It is time to make the decision that nobody else can make. Doctor Strange, do it. Make everyone forget who I am. Make everyone forget Peter Parker and all this stuff. And then Doctor Strange does a spell to make sure that everybody, including MJ, Ned, and all of them, forget who Peter Parker is. And Peter has that scene with MJ that I was just talking about earlier, with that scene where together, when they're saying goodbye and that they love each other. It's one of the most emotional, beautiful scenes, I think, in any Spider-Man movie. And then Peter did the hard choice and made everyone forget. Everything's forgotten. The fact that he fought with Tony, the fact that he knew Happy even. And I love that scene where they have with Happy when he's sitting at May's graveyard, and then Happy doesn't even know who he is. He knows who Spider-Man is. I guess that's how it is that everyone forgets who Peter Parker is, but they know who Spider-Man is. It's just one of those things where I guess, like, when you remember something, like, oh yeah, that's right, that happened. How did that happen again? I guess it's like one of those things where people know stuff happened. They know Spider-Man was involved. Like, they know he was involved in the Avengers and the Civil War and all that. But they just don't remember that it was Peter Parker, I guess. And I think that's kind of what it is, because even Happy doesn't know that May was Peter's aunt, apparently. He knew May through Spider-Man, not Peter Parker. And I love how this whole movie ends. This movie ends now. This movie ends with it basically being an origin story. All of this, from Civil War up until Far From Home, has been an origin story for this Spider-Man. It ends with nobody knowing his identity. He's all alone. He has no Uncle Ben, no Aunt May, no Stark technology, no Avengers help, none of his friends help, because none of his friends know him. He has no friends. He is a loner. He's a loner getting his GED, and is in a crappy little apartment with the guy saying, and please God, let this be Mr. Dinklage, saying he needs to pay rent. And he's also making his own Spider-Man costume, which I love. His apartment, and he has that suit. And then he's making his own suit, his own fabric suit. And then we see him flying off. And he has that little police radar thing of the police and stuff. I'm like, Spider-Man? He's in an apartment alone. He's by himself. He makes in his own suit. He has a police radar. He's poor. Spider-Man! He is now Spider-Man! He goes flying off into the snow, which, again, if you guys were watching Hawkeye, there's a little bit of reference right there. He's flying off in the snow in his new man-made Spider-Man costume, which, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, I know we just got a little bit of it, but just from what we're seeing, the look of it, how is it a mixture between Tobey's and Andrew's, this right here may very well be the best live-action Spider-Man suit to date. Now, you guys know me. I love the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit, and I love the Spider-Man Homecoming suit. My only problem with Spider-Man Homecoming suit is that I didn't really like how, it's a little bit of Starky-like, but it's not that big of a deal. But this is he made it himself Spider-Man suit, and it is perfect. It is just perfect, like this entire movie. Alright, guys, so basically, my only complaint that I can find of this movie, my only real complaint, is that, to me, when Electro came in, and I love Jamie Foxx, so I love this interpretation of Electro better. I love this better of the interpretation of him. My only complaint is that he's supposed to be from the Amazing Spider-Man universe, but he does not. He's probably the only one that feels different from his movie counterpart. Like, he just feels like a completely different version of Jamie Foxx's Max Dillon. Because when the Max Dillon we saw in Amazing Spider-Man, he's not him. From not even the looks. Like, the look is one thing. I don't care about the look. I am talking about the personality. It's just the personality seemed really off and seemed like, okay, this does not seem like the same Electro from there. But they keep on saying it is the same, so I guess it is the same. But he really isn't. Pretty much my only complaint about the movie. Like, wow, that's my only complaint about this movie. So, guys, my overall thoughts of Spider-Man No Way Home is that Spider-Man No Way Home, in my opinion, is the truest, most perfectionist comic book to movie Spider-Man movie ever made. This is Spider-Man. It hits all the beats. It hits all the emotions. It hits all the story elements. It hits all just the movements and things and tones that makes Spider-Man and Peter Parker. And it hits all of those while at the same time making a good movie and a good story out of it. It does not get bogged down by nostalgia or even fan service in here. It does fan service and nostalgia correctly in this movie. It gives you a good narrative and a good story while putting a cherry on the top of special surprises. That's what this movie does. It is a good movie and a good Spider-Man movie before it is a nostalgic movie, and I love that. I love how it was able to manage mixing a Spider-Man feeling movie along with giving a good arc and making this whole trilogy, the whole Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy, basically a origin to Spider-Man, and leaving us off to probably one of the best versions of Spider-Man ever brought on screen, in my opinion. True, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And that's what this movie and what Homecoming and throughout Far From Home did, was give us this origin story of the true perfect Spider-Man, while at the same time giving us more depth and more even character and more love towards past characters. Guys, there's not much more that I can say about this movie other than Spider-Man No Way Home is a straight up 9.5 out of 10. Yes, guys, 9.5 out of 10. I gotta give this movie. Yes, of course, I can't get a 10 out of 10 because 10 out of 10 is very rare. You hardly can give any movie a 10 out of 10, in my opinion. But this is a straight up 9.5 out of 10. And in my opinion, the best Spider-Man movie to date. So guys, what do you guys think of Spider-Man No Way Home? I know this is probably like one of my most longest reviews ever on this channel, I think, right now, but there was a lot to talk about. So here we go. I hope you guys sat through this whole video. Let me know down in the comment section below, and let me know your guys' thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home, on this whole Spider-Man Home trilogy, the MCU trilogy, and just on all the Spider-Man movies in general. I would love to know your thoughts on it. And of course, guys, if you sat throughout this video and you liked this video, please give this channel a like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. It helps out a lot. It helps this channel grow a lot. And lately I've been noticing that you guys have really been supporting this channel a lot lately. And I love it. I love you guys. And I love the support you guys are getting this channel all the time. Now, since the Spider-Man movies are all out of the way, now we did a whole review of the Spider-Man movies, there is something else that's going to be coming on that we're going to be doing a movie review of coming soon. And that is my little bat friend. Of course, guys, until next time, with great power must also come great responsibility. Peter 3!